Yeah.
Okay, we're live. Yay, finally.
Welcome, welcome. We're so happy you're joining us this Monday. My goodness, we've been in absentia for some time, but good reason, good reason. And we're so happy to be back today. I am Linda James Myers, past president of ABC, as well as elder for our Creating Zola Mondays. And I am so happy to introduce our wonderful panelists. Actually, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. In case you've forgotten who they are, I doubt it, but at any rate, let's let them speak.
I'm Harvey Linder. I'm a clinical psychologist in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm a former chair of the Minneapolis chapter. I'm a former Midwest regional representative. I'm currently a member of the ABC Ethics Committee. Robina.
Hey everyone, missed you all. I'm Robina Onwanga. I am past Student Circle Communications as well as Public Relations Chair, and happy to be back in community with you all. And I'll toss it over to JoJo.
Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out everything on Facebook. I'm Janisha Hickson. I am the current DC ABC Vice Chair and Public Relations, and I'm also happy to see you guys. We've been having a lot of technical difficulties, but we're gonna get it together.
And I am William Parham. I am the crisis coordinator for South Bona Healing Circles through ABSI. And I also currently am building enrichment camps in Eugene, Oregon. And so that is why I am showing up from the authentically Black place of being in my car on a live. Because I'm double dipping currently, but I'm honored to be here and be in community with such a brilliant mind.
Thank you, thank you. I think we just lost your audio there on the end, but so happy to have all of our panelists and so happy to have you in our audience. And the Creating Zola Monday Nation is alive and well. And what we want to do today is to talk a little bit more about Zola and its relationship to Angola, and how that has an impact and what its relevance is in contemporary times. We're in interesting times. So much injustice, so much lying, so much of everything that is not what we in the wisdom tradition of African deep thought value and aspire to. As you know, with us, the creative life force came with Ma'at, which is the cosmic force bringing truth, justice, and righteousness. So to be in an environment that is so out of culture just lets us know, hey, we're about to reset. We're about to reset, realign, and reignite that which is sustainable. So with that in mind, let me just say one more word, and then I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to let them share their thoughts. As you recall, Zola is that love, prosperity, presence, eternal energy that will be ignited into Ngola, which is that creative life energy that is healing and sustaining, that maintains us. So on Creating Zola Mondays, we want to definitely put forward the Zola, the love, the energy, the prosperity, the good, so that the Ngola, the healing, the upliftment, the transcendence can be inspired and promoted. And it is indeed that practice that has sustained us as people acknowledging African ancestry since the beginning. And we're here to carry on that tradition. And having said that, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of our panel to speak to whatever's on their hearts and minds.
Well, I'll jump in because I've been thinking about this topic and thinking about some of the things that have gone on over the past few days. Some of you know, most of you don't, that I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I live like a little less than 2 miles from George Floyd Square, the place where George Floyd was murdered a few years back. And we still wrestle with the issue of how to commemorate that spot and how to commemorate what happened here and how to share what we as a community have learned from going through that experience with the rest of the world so that we don't have to keep repeating that experience over and over. Unfortunately, this weekend we had another terrible tragedy that happened in the community when two of our state legislators were attacked. One was killed and her husband was killed. Another was severely wounded, and also his wife was severely wounded. They are in the hospital, and it looks as if they have a good chance of recovery. The irony of that is that I didn't know these two legislators personally. One of them I was very familiar with because I um, watched her in dialogue with others and realized that, the irony is that these were two of the people in the legislature who were known across both aisles of the legislature as being people who could bring folks together, that could get people to sit down and talk and work out their differences and overcome divides that are typical in our legislative bodies today. And so the irony is that these are the two people who um, ended up being attacked and one was murdered. I had a profound sense of sadness over the weekend um, because of that very fact. And what it made me think of is why we do creating Zola Mondays. And I think it reminded me that I'm not sure that everybody really understands what Zola is and what Angola is and what our purpose is in having these dialogues twice a month where we bring people together and we talk about a variety of different topics. Uh, but the notion is to have discourse, to talk, to explore ideas together, to explore our agreements together, and to explore our disagreements, and to learn how to do that in a civil manner. And so I wanted to just kind of kick off today's discussions with that kind of background because I think it's important that we come together and we talk about our differences. And we don't always have uh, a specific topic, but the importance is that we talk across generations, talk across our differences in gender, and we talk with each other. And in that way, we learn more about each other by listening to each other. And we do it in a way that is not always about presenting a certain position or presenting a certain stance that we have, but we talk in order to understand one another better and to understand how to move forward better. Um, uh, the the one of the state legislator who was killed, Lisa Hartman, when she first came into the legislature, there's a story about what she did is she gave all her colleagues, both Democratic and Republican, um, a copy of the book that's called Getting to Yes. And Getting to Yes is about um, how you work through differences by focusing not on the personalities present, but focusing on the issues and focusing on what everyone has to gain from solving the problem. And I think that that's kind of what we had to do in having these conversations on creating Zola Mondays. And and one of the reasons I think it's not well understood is because we've had a little bit of a misunderstanding, difference of opinion with our National Convention Committee about wanting to combine creating Zola Mondays with something like TED Talks. And it's a great idea, you know, how do we bring people together and have more conversations? But there is a discrepancy between our approach in creating Zola Monday and the approach that you get in a forum like TED Talks. In TED Talks, people talk. They present a position, and there is no there's no capacity for dialogue, for people, for the audience to respond back and ask questions, and for there to be an interchange. And we think that that's important. We think that the interchange is what's valuable. That's how people get beyond their own internal thinking and learn how to begin to share uh, thinking with others and to come to a collective viewpoint, a collective position. And Zola is about connection. That we are all connected. We are all connected with each other and with nature and with the universe. And we can't do that. We can't learn that if we can't talk to each other. So I'll start with that. And I don't want to dominate the discussion today because I want it to be a discussion. I don't want it to be a presentation. I don't have a presentation to make. But I think it's an issue that we need to discuss more. And so I'll invite my colleagues to jump in and give their positions and give feedback. And unfortunately, our setup right now doesn't really allow us to allow the audience to engage. And we're trying to get to a point where we can have a setup where we can have some back and forth between ourselves and the listening audience. But for now, we will do it by demonstrating how we converse with one another, how we dialogue with one another as a model for how we progress to that shared sense of being. So, anybody?
Yeah,
Well,
I just wanted to speak on the issue that you were touching on about kind of this like constant media stream right now of darkness, of sadness, of hurt, of pain, and that it almost seems as if there's a like a reasoning behind being bombarded with what we're being bombarded with in this news cycle. And so for me personally, I have had to this especially this weekend do news fast and fill myself with things that renew me. I've been listening every day to Black affirmations. That's been something that I have to make sure I'm sitting with right now because it feels like the opposite of that is giving in to the terror, giving in to the fear, giving in to the sadness. And it's almost as if they're like to go in that kind of spiritual warfare realm, as if they're almost trying to cultivate this sadness for entities that may feed off of these types of energies. And so I'm trying to counter that with grounding myself in healing activities, healing things.
excellent. I think that's a brilliant strategy. I think it's also true that the negativity that we're seeing the media portray is real. There's a war going on, actually more than one, brutality. We're in a social environment in the US of A where violence and injustice is pervasive. And so I remember during the Reagan era, they were talking about the trickle-down theory when it comes to economics. We all know that didn't work. But there's also a trickle-down reality of negativity and meanness and injustice that does trickle down. And I think many of us are seeing that and experiencing it in our daily lives. But the truth of the matter is, as you just stated, William, that's going to be what it's going to be. How we're going to ground ourselves in terms of turning our time and attention on something that is healing, uplifting, allows for that health and transcendence, I think is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about Zola, creating Zola to ignite that in Gola. So thank you for sharing, and I will shut up and let Robina and Jonisha talk.
I love how we're sharing the mic today. I was thinking about the work we do with Sawubona Healing Circles. So there, like you said, Dr. Linder, there's a lot of discourse, and I think a lot of that is contingent upon like the dichotomy, right? Like this is good or bad, this is positive or negative, this, that, and the third. And I've been trying to like find a balance, not a balance, but like a harmony in a lot of that. So for instance, I know there's a lot of discourse around, right, all of these protests that are going on with regard to ICE and things like that. And of course, like we know that our liberation is bound up in one another and that it's contingent upon each other. But also I've been seeing a lot of people attacking Black people who are choosing not to protest or not to, you know, put their bodies on the line for to resist ICE. And I'm just like, I don't know like where I stand on that argument, because I understand, right? People are feeling the sentiments of anti-Blackness that impact us globally in different communities. So I do see a lot of, you know, discourse and a lot of heated debates and arguments and stuff like that. And when I think about the discussions that I get into, I always bring it back to Zola. I'm like, let me question my own intentions and where I am coming from. Is it my ego, or am I coming from a place of love and understanding and, you know, solidarity? So yeah, it's a lot. But I'm also thinking about your diurnal logic that two things can be true at once, or multiple things can be true at once. So yeah, crazy times we're in right now.
Yeah, I similarly to what you shared, William was also feeling some sense of sadness over the weekend too. And I think it's just a combination of a lot of different things with what's going on, and knowing that these are things that are impacting people that I know directly, just in terms of the fear that's being instilled within communities of folks who are immigrants or just anybody that looks like us. And then the dissension that's coming from, like what you said, Jojo, about people being accosted for not protesting or not speaking up on it. And I've gone through phases or seasons of like, okay, I'm taking a break from social media and I'm not looking at this, kind of like you mentioned with like the fasting from it. And I think that's something that has helped me, because even though it is a way to stay up to date on what's going on in the world, unfortunately, like Donna Linda reminds us, like these things are happening because we do live amongst leaders or like of a nation that just responds with violence. And so how can we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves in that process? And yeah, for me, it also looks like just taking a step back sometimes and taking care of myself and being aware of what my capacity is to support other people, and knowing that I can't pour from an empty glass, but also not feel about that, and how I'm not able to show up from moment to moment. But I think to the point that you made, yeah, of people like, I guess, whatever they're speaking poorly on Black folks who are not participating right now. Yeah, I think just being compassionate with each other and recognizing that people have contributed at different time points. And maybe right now they just feel like, you know what, like I'm not trying to put myself on the front line, or this is what I need at this moment. And being more supportive and curious, as opposed to us judging folks who are not showing up in ways that we expect that they should be. Because it's a long fight. And if we're all doing it all at once, then we're not able to maybe rejuvenate properly or be able to figure out what we need. So I feel like it is kind of tough to see what's going on, but then not be able to step in. And I don't think that, at least for me, I feel like most people's intentions, or at least within our community, are positive. And the folks who maybe are confused are, not at that level or not at that stage of consciousness where they're accepting that what is happening within certain communities is impacting them as well. And I think that's something that we always talk about, how our liberation is bound up in others' liberation, like Ancestor Fanny said. But I think people are slowly recognizing it, because, okay, first it was happening, has happened in Rwanda, and it's happening in Palestine. And now that it's in our back door with immigrants, people feel like are kind of waking up a little bit more with each unfortunate and like tragic instance of our power being stripped from us. But back to what you said, Dr. Linder, it goes through conversations like this to where we're helping by just speaking about things that are happening and allowing for differences of opinions to come up so that we can continue to raise our own consciousness and just hold each other accountable to what is going on. And hopefully we get more to a place where we're able to understand the interconnectedness of everything and be able to move more harmoniously too, like you said, Jojo.
You know, one of the things that strikes me just in hearing each of you speak is the realization that this is so long-standing and layered and nuanced that the conversations can't be just superficial. They're really going to have to be deep conversations, because the historical realities are the historical realities, whether people want to acknowledge them or not. The reality is, for the past 200 years, Black people have taken leadership. We fought for civil rights for not just ourselves, which probably wasn't the best strategy, but was the strategy we chose. We fought for civil rights for the mothers, the sisters, the daughters, the very people who took primary roles in oppressing us. We didn't say, oh, no, this is just for Black people acknowledging African ancestry who were indeed the descendants of people who were enslaved as caste chattel for 200 years and built the wealth of this nation, their captors in the entire Western world. We didn't do that. Why didn't we do that? I think it has to do in a bit with our relationship to Zola and its relationship to Ngola and healing. So I'm not in a position or in a community where I'm getting a lot of feedback about, why aren't Black people out there protesting? But I understand, and I'm very much hearing what you're saying, William and Robina and Jonisha, who are out there. But I would say to anybody who has that question, there's another question they should be asking themselves. Why weren't we out there when they were getting hosed, dogged down, beaten? Oh, well, with George Floyd, many of people who hadn't been out there previously came out. And now a few years later, what do we see? I think it was Angela Davis who said, if they come for me in the evening, they'll come for you in the morning. And guess what, folks? It's morning. It's morning, and they are here for you. We have no rights or protection under the law anymore. I don't know if many of you really have thought about that, but the way so-called democracy is being eroded, the way the rules that used to govern the society have been eroded and taken away, it's enough to make anybody a little bit, if not nervous, aware. We must become aware. And I think if indeed it is true, and I don't know that it is true, but if indeed it is true that we're not being represented as fully in demonstrations against the injustice that's been pervasive for so very long, if that indeed is true, which I'm seriously doubting, we have to be mindful of the fact that it is morning. They've come for all of us. We are losing rights under the law. The Constitution has no value if indeed the Supreme Court and the judicial system doesn't step up and hold the bar. Then there's so many things: the loss of freedoms, the loss of privacy, the things that are happening that make it easy for a fascist government to control, incarcerate, silence all of us without due process is here. And maybe we're seeing it now, legislated against the so-called immigrants who are here illegally. That's not a crime. It is a civil issue, but it's being treated as a criminal issue. So many things have been criminalized, are being criminalized. And so I think the conversation that we're having is so very important, but I don't think it's one that we can afford to have without really confronting what the reality is that we are facing and acknowledging it. One of the things we know as psychologists is one of the worst things you can do in the face of traumatizing events is to go into denial mode, because that's just going to hurt you. We need to bring to conscious awareness the realities that exist, and then we need to grapple with them so that we can get to that place of harmony. And I liked what you said, Donisha, earlier on when you were talking about, or maybe it was you, Robin, I'm not sure, about this whole diunital issue of right and wrong. There is right and there is wrong. Both do coexist at the same time. And what you perceive one to be versus the other is totally contingent upon your worldview, your assumptions, the values, the principles that you hold to be true, because that's the lens that's going to determine, oh, it's not right to decimate a whole nation of people who were on the land before we came and moved them off and compartmentalize them. It's not okay to go into other people's land that they are fully invested in, have been for centuries, and commit genocide against them and claim it as their own, or kidnap people as chattel and slaves. That's wrong, according to my moral compass. But we live in a social context where, oh, that's right. Settler colonialism is alive and well. We're seeing it now being perpetrated once again, unfortunately, with our nation and to a great extent playing a primary and key role. So not to be negative, but to simply speak truth and hopefully supply people with that Zola, that love and compassion they first of all need to have for themselves because of their connection to that infinite creative life force, that energy. We know all is energy, and an energy manifests in different kinds of ways. We know there's a duality to it all, but as we connect with that energy that will sustain us, that energy that has that sense of balance and harmony and compassion, and a willingness to seek knowledge and wisdom and understanding. As we connect with that energy, it will be that energy which has carried us to this point to even be here to have this conversation, because our ancestors went through hell, so to speak, to get us here. And it will be that same energy that will carry us forward to future generations. So even though I see what's going on very clearly, and I see that what's been created by people's inability to stand for what's true and just and right and foster a narrative that's not true, that's what's got us to this point. But what's going to get us to the next point that transcends all this is the same thing that brought our ancestors to the place that they dreamed of, where their progeny would be sitting, standing, talking, fighting for that which is true, just, and right. And they will become that same synergistic energy, harmonious force that can move even the most despicable of systems of social organization out of the way.
And it's important for all of us to remember that energy that created all of us and creates the universe we live in. It doesn't expect us all to be exactly the same, and it doesn't expect us all to have the same response. We can have different responses and still be a part of moving things forward. So sort of what Janisha and Rabina were saying about the people who are not out on the front on the front lines. Doesn't mean they're less important. They may be responding in a different way, but they can still be contributing. And we need to recognize that there's more than one way to contribute to the struggle.
There's 5 areas of revolution, as y'all all know on this call. And those 5 different areas of revolution are all just as vitally as important to what's going on. And so there are folks that can be on the front line, and then there are folks who can be behind the scenes. There are folks who can feed the culture. There are folks who can feed the spiritual nature of revolution. And I think it speaks to the insidiousness of white supremacy that Black folks would be getting come for not being on the front lines, when it's a white man who is deporting these people. It's a white man who is tearing up these homes. And so it speaks to the nature of white supremacy and how we catch strays for wanting to like show rest and wanting to take space for ourselves. And I mean, we are out there on the front lines. It was the Marines arrested a Black man over the weekend. That was a Black man who was arrested by the Marines for the first time ever. You know, and so I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing no statements really coming from this presidential administration on the lawmakers that were killed, and it's speaking to something, but it just, I feel like there's polarity, right, that happens in the world, and right now it's swinging to a certain threshold, but it will swing back.
You said there were 5 kinds of resistance. Was that it, William?
5 areas of revolution from the Haitian revolution.
And what were they?
It's social, economic, military, spiritual, education, and I think I only said 4.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember what.
Art and culture. I don't know if that goes into
Culture.
the one of the other ones you said, but yeah.
Oh, you did say 5. You said social, economic, military, educational, and I forgot, and spiritual.
Spiritual, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The reason I wanted to reflect back on that is, indeed, there is something that ties them all together. It's not like, well, there's this one over here and that one over there. Mm-hmm. They're all interrelated. They're all independent. They're all inseparable. And I think for our wisdom tradition, the one that seems to sustain most powerfully is the spiritual foundation of all of them. Mm-hmm. The spiritual foundation of all of them. And I think the reality is, as you were saying, Dr. Linden, we all don't have to do the same thing, the same way at the same time. But what we all need to be doing is to be in touch with that creative divine force within us that will guide us. Go there, do this. This is what you need to be about. This is what you need to be about. Maybe the spirit will be telling you what you need to do is sit down, go on somewhere and pray. You just pray. And your charge is to go and stand in some demonstration. But it did not miss me that the first person, the military, who's not even supposed to be arresting civilians, it was a Black man who was, we don't know what, he was just standing there peacefully as near as I could see, what they arrested him for. It also did not miss me that when certain leaders were speaking in the military, some of them were laughing at him. Some of them were saying things that weren't positive about him. So we're in a position we've never been in before. We don't know what happens when the leadership, commander-in-chief, if you will, orders the sons, daughters, sisters, mothers, fathers of other fellow Americans to go after those fellow Americans and kill them? Do they obey? Do they resist and rebel? And in this instance, what we saw them is obeying. And the first one they went after is who they always go after first. So let me remind those people who might be a little bit disturbed or disgruntled, thinking that Black people aren't out there in the front line. We stay on the front line. We stay on the front line. There's never a time you can be Black in America and not be on the front line. Trust me, I've been Black in America for a very long time. So just take that somewhere else.
But I think also that we have to come to a recognition that the front line is not necessarily out on the streets of LA. You know, the front line may be in the hearts and minds of people who never get to the street. You know, and that as Black psychologists, you know, one of our duties is to figure out how to change the thinking process, the belief process, the awareness process, not to be out in the streets throwing, bottles at police officers. I mean, that's, yes, there probably needs to be protest, but protest is not going to get us beyond this present situation. And we really do have to rebuild the connections between humanity to get beyond this situation. It's like, we can't remain in the position of reacting to what others are doing. We have to lead, and we have to teach, and we have to help people understand another position. And so that's our work. That's the work we have ahead of us. How do we transcend, the present situation rather than just standing in place and reacting to the present situation and fighting back when bad things happen?
As one of our brilliant leaders always says, Zola up on we. Mm-hmm. That's how we transcend. Zola up on we.
But Baba Wade says that, and I don't know if people really understand what that means. Which is, one of the reasons I wanted to have this discussion today. I don't know that people understand what Zola is.
I think the real question is, do you understand what Zola is? And not to be rude, but just simply to say, when I understand what something is, then I can try to express it, and I can't have any control over who understands, who doesn't understand. Mm-hmm. The energy field works such that when you're ready, a teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. When you're ready, you'll have the ears to hear and the eyes to see. So our charge isn't to judge if people understand or don't understand. Our charge is to put it out there, knowing we're planting seeds, and whoever's ready and able gets it and is motivated and moved. Who is not will get it in time. There is divine order to the universe. We're a part of that order. And I'm very committed to the realization that when we trust in that order, it's all good, as the kids used to say.
Yeah, I was gonna take, we have a lot of comments in the audience, so I wanted to bring attention to those. Dennis Rogers, PhD, said, for many, the protests are trauma-inducing, when we were talking about the LA protests and the No Kings protests going on around the world. He also said the Black-Brown coalitions that broke down are sorely missing. The Latino support of Trump also is off-putting to many Black folks. Fight, flight, and freeze are levels of response to the new reality as well. And then there was a question as well. I think the question, how do we as Black psychologists inoculate our community to deal with this at this time, or to deal at this time?
Do you want us to respond to that and then go on to the next one you want to do? Are there more than that?
There's two questions. So how do we as Black psychologists inoculate our community to deal at this time? And how do we deal with inhumane behaving Europeans as fully human Africans or Black folks? trying to see if I can copy and paste that into the chat for us.
In terms of the inoculation, I think the inoculation can only be brought about by utilizing the greatest power we have, which is to learn how to take our power back and define reality for ourselves. When you define your reality for yourself, you're not worried about what other people think. You're not worried about white supremacy. You know who you are, you know who they are, you know who you've always been and who they've always been. Then you can take your time and attention and focus it on that which you hope to create, that which is going to be reflective of you. That in and itself is an inoculation. I call it falling prey to a suboptimal view that keeps us focused out there for solutions. An optimal view said, no, out there's out there. Not much I can do out there, but you know what? I have a hell of a power within here. Let me go within here. Define reality for myself, connect with that divine force which is within me, that is eternal, by the way. You can't kill that force. You can take my body. You probably don't want to do that because you're probably better off if that force is still confined to a body, because we don't know what's going to happen when it's out of the body. So I don't want to get too out there for you, but I would say this: inoculation comes from connecting to that spiritual source and tapping in. And I was listening to something, I think it was from someone speaking about the Community Healing Network, who has as one of their mottos, defy the lie. And I think that's problematic, because to defy a lie, you have to pay attention to the lie, first of all. Then you also have to believe it's worth fighting and defying. And my contribution was embrace the truth. To hell with the lie. Embrace the truth. Embrace the truth of who you really are, what your history really is, and stop buying into, oh, they didn't respect me and they didn't think I could do this and I could do that. They didn't think you were human. Still don't, okay? Give it up. Let's take our power back and define reality. We are the mothers and fathers of all human culture and civilization. Anthropologically, biogenetically, linguistically, archaeologically, every way possible, humanly possible, points to who we really are. And if you're going to let someone come in with a lie to convince you of something other than that, at some point we have to say, shame on them for doing that, but that's who they've always been, probably maybe all they'll always be, but shame on you if you continue to let them fool you twice.
And I think that
yourselves.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that we as Black psychologists, how we do that, I think that how we do that is by fostering discussions like this, or discussions like we do in the healing circles, where people can ask questions. They can challenge their own ideas and think through it with others around. This is not just, it's not a church. It's not a belief system. It's not, something you just, pass down the right answers to people. People have to struggle with what they know and what they think they know, and they have to learn to unknow some of the things that they've learned.
Which will lead them to their belief systems, by the way. I'm just saying.
And I think it's also important too for us to acknowledge and have our communities acknowledge where we're feeling these things. And I think one of the things that we can do for our communities is, when we're going through where folks are feeling these things, is also utilizing somatic techniques that can allow people to really connect with the feelings while also not going into those trauma places. Because like the brother expressed in the comments, these protests are severely traumatic for me. I was on the ground in 2020 in Seattle. I was shot with rubber bullets. I was tear gassed. I was pepper sprayed. They messed me up. And so watching these protests is a constant trigger event, but I have to make sure that I am present in my body, present in my space, and present in my awareness. And that allows me to even be able to go back to these spaces and show up in these spaces and be able to be a calming force and I go out as a emotional first aid medic in some of these protest spaces. And so I owe a lot of that to the somatics practices that I incorporate into my life.
And we shared those over the last 2 sessions. So thank you so much for that. You said there was a second question, Donisha?
Right here. How do we deal with inhumane behaving Europeans as fully human African Black folks?
I think so. My thoughts when I read this question is, one, the fact that we acknowledge that they are behaving inhumanely, and then also kind of to optimal or the belief systems analysis that I also have come to, have as my worldview, is that I believe that African Black people, we do a really good job of tapping into our divinity, which is available to everyone. But, some folks who think they're the moral high ground are actually the ones who are not even tapped into it. And I feel like because we are, we're, 100% human, but we also know that we have divine energy and we know who our source, our life source is, that we're able to deal with things in a much more like a way that's more connected to the virtues of Mayat. So being able to see other people as human, being able to approach situations in a way that is not going to escalate them to a point of no return or to incite more violence, is just in our nature to be able to connect with other people. So I think the answer really goes for me back to what Nana Linda just said with the previous question. But for my bit was just to acknowledge that, yeah, we are human, and acknowledging that people are behaving inhumanely is something that should just give us like context or something to work off of. Like, we're not going to give our energy away to people who are inhumane, especially when we know that we are beings who have such divine energy within us that helps us to be able to navigate daily life, because otherwise there's no way that we would still be here. They've tried everything against our ancestors. And I know at some points we talk quite a bit about intergenerational trauma, but we have also acknowledged that there's so much intergenerational joy and creativity and resilience that is flowing just through our people across the diaspora and on the motherland. And that energy is energy that cannot be killed, which is what they've been trying to do by unaliving us in the bodily form. But we continue to resist and we continue to feed off of each other. From the continent all the way to where we reside today. And so I think remembering that about ourselves and community is a really good way that helps with that. Like Dr. Linda was saying, is seeing us in this space, even though now we are, in different places physically, but we're able to connect, and I could feel the energy, and I'm already feeling better about, continuing the day and the week, because I've had this conversation and been reminded of who I am and whose I am. And I think that goes a long way.
Thank you so much for that, Robina. It's so important. And I think, as you say, if I know who I am and I know who they are, inhumanely behaving people who've always behaved inhumanely, it didn't just happen all of a sudden from inception of this nation in the Western world, pretty much. That's how they got to be the Western world, colonization. So if we stop being confused or thinking we're confused and just confront the reality, that's who they are. And it's not black or white, actually. It's moral or immoral, righteous or non-righteous, truth or untrue. When you engage people who are that, have always been that, or have just become that, it's okay. Let them go. let them go, let you go, free yourself, inoculate yourself, liberate your mind from the menticide and the conceptual incarceration, and turn your attention to that which you desire. I want a just, sacred, sustainable world. That's what I want to build. That's my goal. And if I keep my eye on that goal, then I will be led in the way to go. And not only led in the way to go, what our ancestors taught, then I'll let my creativity flow. I'll create the music, the energy, the dance, the love, or the joy that makes my path pleasurable, sustainable. And when that energy tells me, they're coming for you, get your gun, maybe that's what I'll need to do. I don't block that out, but I do know this. I know the spirit will tell me where to go, what to do, when to go, and what to do and how to do. So we're shifting our consciousness, aren't we? We're letting go of that fragmented, individualistic, egoistic notion of who we are and what's out there to that divine, internal, eternal energy life force who's going to lead us in a different direction. It's a beautiful thing. Now, you all, if you don't talk, I'm going to talk. We're out of time. So why don't we hear from everybody?
I just think that was a great way to wrap it up.
I do have one last comment though. When you were talking, I was just like soaking this in because it's just so like rejuvenating, and it reminded me of I want to say it was 2 weeks now, or maybe it was last week. I don't know. Time is not real. Me and Evan went to Houston, where Robina lives, and so does Baba Nobles. We went to go celebrate his birthday, and we had a plan for housing, and that kind of fell through. And luckily, Robina, she adjusted. It should be all over the world, but she was back home, so we were able to reconnect with Robina, and it was so beautiful, and it was so like divinely ordained. And I know we talked about this on our Linda. There were some of y'all were missing because y'all were traveling. But at the birthday party, at Baba Noble's birthday party, there was just so much love in the room and spirit and energy, and just you could just, I don't know, it was just, I don't know, it was indescribable. Like even Dr. Derek Wilson's family was there, his wife and daughter and mother. And so like seeing them was just moving to me, and I felt his energy there. And it was just a reminder that we are so deeply connected, no matter what dimension, time, space. I don't know, like we got us on lock. And so I just say all that to say that I love being Black. I wouldn't want to be anything else. And also, if y'all didn't see that video of the Black man asking the AI if he could come back as,
I was just thinking about that.
Who would he be? The AI was like, Black. I would be a Black person, because we are the closest iteration of God's love in the human flesh that the AI, right, based on his research, has seen. And I believe it, and I agree.
Yeah, Chat GPT. If you haven't seen it, it's worth looking at.
And that is a testament to Blackness, right? Because it is white programmers who are programming those AI. So for the AI to see that Blackness is the closest to divinity, that is just such a statement of righteousness.
Yeah.
Again,
what they're trying to do. No, they know what they're trying to kill. They know exactly what they want.
Or it's possible Chat GPT didn't create that at all. Whoever did, it's still true. It's still true. But I hope what you're saying is true, because that's the first thing that crossed my mind and said, wow, they got those algorithms perfectly right, even though they might not have intended to.
Well, this has been heartwarming. So thank you all. And thank you, folks out in the audience.
Yeah, this conversation has been uplifting, inspiring, and has really shifted the feelings of this weekend to feelings that I can carry throughout this week. And I think that's also something that we can share with our communities, is like Dr. Linder was saying, like Dr. Nana was saying, Nana Linda James was saying, is to have these conversations in community.
Absolutely. And so Creating Zola Munda Nation. Be strong. Keep your joy and your peace and your happiness. And until the next time, peace and blessings. You're much appreciated.